This is Health Unabashed, broadcasting live on Healthcare Now Radio. Health Unabashed is a conversational platform where healthcare meets innovation. We engage top industry talent and dive into the heart of health and wellness from vision to business model to bring you the latest developments in health tech to promising AI applications, policy, and ultimately impact on the public's health and well-being. I'm Greg Masters, co-host and executive producer, and I'm joined by the digital health aficionado himself, author, editor, global thought leader, and in his executive capacity, steward servant Gil Bash. Together, we're on a mission to bring you the people, the ideas, and the companies that are not just talking the talk, but walking the talk. On today's menu, we are in the company of the amazing Aneesh Chopra. Aneesh served as president of CareJourney, recently acquired by Arcadia in June of this year, where Aneesh now serves as the chief strategy officer of the combined company. CareJourney is an open data membership service building a trusted, transparent rating system for physicians, networks, facilities, and markets on the move to value. He served as the first U.S. Chief Technology Officer under President Obama, and in 2014, authored Innovative State, How New Technologies Can Transform Government. He serves on the board of the Healthcare Cost Institute, the New Jersey Innovation Institute, and earned his MPP from Harvard Kennedy School and a BA from the Johns Hopkins University. CareJourney uses population claims data to address use cases in network design and management, care model management, patient risk segmentation, spend and utilization trends, network integrity, low-value care, and provider practice and facility acute and post-acute performance. That's a mouthful. So, Gil, the mic is yours.
Aneesh, fantastic to see you. And Greg, thank you so much for making this happen. Now, Aneesh, we spoke about a year and a half ago, and you were really in the midst of establishing your venture. I know that there's been some shifts there. Obviously, it's on to the next great and even better stage, and you're taking on a very important role in a new combined venture. I won't go into that. Obviously, you can add commentary to that, but I really want to find out what's been happening with you over the last 18 months. What have you learned? And for those of you who are not familiar with Aneesh, I don't think that there are many out there who don't know Aneesh Chopra, who obviously spent time in the Obama White House, had the distinction of really being the president's first chief technology officer. I have a few things I want to ask you. I want to ask you what you've been doing in terms of improving health. I also want to speak to you about what happened a few days ago. You were interviewed, and I think you were on CNBC. And we're talking
on security.
On security, on cybersecurity. Obviously, your roots are in technology. Technology is key. And I might say I spoke with recently with a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Your senator, I believe, if you're
my hero, my guru, my mentor. Yes, Mark Warner.
Right. I didn't know that Mark was your mentor. Mark and I had a one-on-one conversation about the role of cybersecurity and health and how critical it is. So I also want to get into that a little bit.
Yes.
But what have you been doing the last 18 months?
Well, I've been doing with the same mission and vision I've been doing for the last decade, frankly, going back more than a decade, which is to say, how do we build a healthcare delivery system that helps people get the very best possible care at every step of their journey? That's been the North Star, the passion, the motivation. And what's exciting to me is that the nature of the challenge to get to that promised land evolves. In the early days, there was a data access problem. So you can't really figure out if a patient is not on track if you didn't have the ability to run some understanding about their history, because information about their past would help inform what's happening to them moving forward. So the lack of access to their past makes it more difficult. We've spent a lot of time over the last decade to open up information. We've started out by making medical claims data available to doctors that wanted to take on this more accountability approach, where they would take responsibility for the patient in between the visits. But we've also understood the value of this 10-year journey of digitizing the electronic health record. And we've spent a lot of that initial decade kind of wiring up the systems to collect the data. We're just now on the cusp of moving the data to its highest and best use, patient access, to physicians who are taking on that treatment relationship for purposes of more broad coordinated care. And the challenge now, in many ways, is that while the pipes are live, there have not been as many people prepared to use. There's been a lot of challenges on what to do with it now that the information is getting readily available. Part of what excited me over the last 18 months was to get closer and closer to a firm called Arcadia, where a lot of Care Journeys members, some of our most sophisticated, like Rush in Chicago, companies like Tandem in Philadelphia, Southwestern Health Resources. These are organizations that have been actively focused on making sure that the information they're collecting, now that it's available, is interpreted or analyzed to make sure that they can prioritize the actions that would make any individual patient's lives a little bit better. So by joining forces with that, and that's the key.
Okay, I just want to grab you there for a second.
Please.
So obviously you've sort of let the cat out of the bag in terms of the news that you just announced just a few weeks ago with Care Journey and Arcadia becoming one and the same, and you're taking on an executive role with Arcadia. I wanted to ask you something about the premise you put forward, which is,
yes,
the pipes are being laid. The challenge isn't that so much the technology, that the problem is really the user of the technology. It's always really culture crushes innovation. We know that.
yes.
That's not what I do. So I just wanted to interrupt you. I apologize and
Not
ask
at all.
you about
Yeah.
about how is sort of Gen AI and LLMs influencing that behavior pattern where suddenly a health professional can interact with the machine, with the pipes, and just say, "Hey, I'd love to know how Mrs. Smith's cardiovascular history is doing," or can you tell me a little bit about the progression of Mrs. Smith's congestive heart failure, and suddenly the data is speaking to the clinician? I mean, has that really influenced your own journey in looking at care?
I mean, look, post November 2022, a lot of my energy has been on how to thoughtfully, responsibly introduce these technologies into the healthcare ecosystem. And one of the biggest exciting opportunities is to summarize or synthesize all of the historical understanding about the patient to better understand what might happen next if I didn't do something. And if so, to recommend what I should be doing as sort of a decision support aid, more on the navigation side than what you typically hear, which is this patient's crashing into sepsis. Does the AI model help me understand what to do at the moment? So there's clearly a use case for in-hospital at the moment AI, but I see the future more on the ambulatory dynamic where you're really helping people navigate. It's that individual who may see a deterioration in their health status, but it doesn't manifest to the point where they pick up the phone to call to get a doctor's visit. That's where you sort of have to capture that underdiagnosed condition that's easier to treat and manage when it's caught early. So to me,
18 months ago, we didn't say the following words. We didn't say AI. We didn't say Gen AI. We didn't say ChatGPT. We didn't say LLMs.
Right. We've been saying AI for a while.
We called it machine learning. I'm sorry. We called it machine learning, or we called it big data before that.
That's right.
We were certainly.
So perhaps the signature effort for me personally over the last 18 months has been recruiting about maybe several dozen, now north of 40 health systems and health plans before any official government regulation forces them to set forward a set of voluntary commitments on the responsible use of AI to achieve broad societal outcomes. And these are the CVS and Premera and a whole range of health systems, Devoted, Oscar on the plan
Big
side.
plus players.
Exactly. Healthcareaicommitments.com. And we meet monthly with our friends in the White House and the HHS leadership in AI. Of course, we celebrate on this very day that we're filming, Mickey Tripathi, whom I dearly love, elevated to the Assistant Secretary now for Technology within the Secretary of HHS's office. It's a really big promotion to the role and to Mickey personally, I think, to reflect on his capability, but also the importance of the time we're in. And so that is all about public-private collaboration to do what you said, to unlock the potential. I worry, vendors can throw a lot of technical work on the wall to say, hey, look, I've got an app for that. That's not exactly how we're going to introduce this. We got to marry how to do this responsibly while exciting, capturing the excitement of the moment. So that's a little bit about where I think we're
I
heading.
get that, so.
And that's a little bit of the moment we're in, is to see how to apply that in the population or accountable care case.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. I think we're experiencing Moore's law on steroids right now in terms of the, LLMs have come in and, what's right around the corner. I mean, our ability to process information and interact with information is moving at such rapid speed that if we don't stop and reflect on the responsible use of how we do that, I think it might get away with us. I don't want to put you on the spot, but, there's the
Please.
discussion about how to responsibly do this. Can you share with listeners maybe 2 or 3 things that we should be concerned about?
Oh, well, look, I mean, obviously the number one concern, well, there's 3 that I have my anxieties up. Number 1, I worry that it'll exacerbate inequities, right? Which is to say,
Absolutely.
if you don't have the right inputs into the algorithm,
The
you might end up
cognitive age, my friend, the cognitive age. If you can't ask the right questions of the system, you're left behind.
Yeah, or if the inputs to the system, as we saw with the, if you go to the White House website on algorithmic discrimination, literally the number 1 entry is the Optum algorithm that Ziad Obermeyer looked at, that said by the input to the algorithm being the historical spend, not the underlying health status of the patient, care management resources were highly allocated towards, say, more white or privileged Americans who could access the systems in a manner that would rank up the costs. Whereas those that may have underlying need but access issues would be almost penalized in the ability to get the kind of support that they needed. Ironically, you might say, in fact, we want to put more care management resources on those who are struggling, because that's actually how we're going to get the overall system to work better. So algorithmic discrimination is obviously already the poster child of anxiety, and one that I'm anxious about. I think there's 2 more that I'm mindful of. And so there is a little bit of the privacy and security concerns, not a little, a lot, around. At the moment, LLMs are trained on the internet, and medical records, thankfully, are not widely available on the internet. So they're right, supposedly. No, in all seriousness, so therefore the power of the transformer architecture, I should say, more so than LLMs about words, predict the next word. This is about predicting the next event, in the case of data, health data. So there is an open question: what is the safe and responsible way in which we can put medical records, large repositories of records, to help understand perhaps what would best practice look like for my mom, and how close is her current care plan towards that best practice? Okay, so that's the vision of the learning health system to me. My worry, Gil, is that we might find ourselves in a market that is fast and loose to kind of get to AI. Folks may be trying to grab data and train on data a little bit prematurely. And so that's why we got this coalition of the health systems and plans, because that way they're kind of making a stake in the ground. We're not here to race to the AI doctor irresponsibly. We're racing in a more responsible pace to bring that data set, or that category of data, into this architecture so we can squeeze the value out of it.
Yeah,
Now,
it's interesting you say this, by the way. I just want to,
yeah,
when we talk about AI, and AI means, sort of like different things. I'm actually defining AI as I go forward to augmented implementation. And I think that this thing of artificial intelligence, how do you have intelligence or organic information that you and I provide a system? How's that artificial? That's organic, that's real. And then the issue is, it's not ethereal. It's not, we're not talking about theory about this information. We're talking about the application. I mean, how do you feel about calling it augmented implementation as opposed to artificial intelligence?
I agree. And in fact, you almost like a layup. It's almost like we built this podcast for us to go back and forth, Gil. That's my third concern. Augmented means that I'm a partner to a human. We need to have a human in the loop. But there's been some early research done to show, if you're an expert in something and the augmented layer guides you to a worse decision, not help you make a better decision, more people than you would expect downgrade their expert judgment and default to the machine. So in an irony, it may be augmented to the negative, not augmented to the good. Now, that may be a longer tail risk, but in an area where there is high performance, high variation, just as much as I want to lift the bottom so we have access to high quality care, I certainly don't want to downgrade the best because we've sort of kind of automated this sort of, click the button routine. And so there is, so if you think of these three challenges, they're all there and we need to mitigate them and address them. But if we do, they will all lead towards a place that'll be helpful. And I'm grateful that Arcadia team is obviously knee deep in the data infrastructure you would need to do value-based care well. In fact, that's why I was so eager to partner with them. We did a lot of benchmarking at Care Journey. We had access to the entire CMS data set and other data sets to help figure out who the best doctors are. And we're grateful that people were joining Care Journey to get access to those insights. But you want to marry that with information about your actual population, like the PHI. And so putting those two pieces together, that's a data set that can be really a thoughtful and important contributor to kind of the augmented services to the good as you're describing it.
No,
So
this is,
long-winded way of saying, I think that's why you hear my excitement in the voice about where we're heading in the next 5 years.
Just dropping in, you're right on time for Health Unabashed on Healthcare Now Radio. Today we're chatting with Aneesh Chopra, formerly president of Care Journey, now serving as chief strategy officer at Arcadia. We're discussing a range of topics in AI and digital health, including Aneesh's role as the Obama administration's chief technology officer. Stay tuned for the rest of the story.
yeah, so we talk about some of the things, the dumbing down of brilliant doctors. I find it hard to believe that Eugene Brumwald or Valentin Fuster will all of a sudden become sort of like not A++, but A- doctors. Let's hope not, by the system. I think they'll still go by their wealth of knowledge. Those are the people who their institutional memory, their experience, they really had humongous pattern skills. I think we've entered the cognitive age, and the once upon a time the greatest doctors, and I mentioned two of the many great doctors that exist, their ability was their power of information retention. They became microprocessors, and their ability to deploy that information when they saw different cases. And so their cognitive powers were extraordinary compared to other doctors. Now, of course, in theory, we're in the age of AI or Gen AI or LLMs, we're taking very good doctors and ideally amplifying them up, dialing them up. You've talked about something a little frightening that is never mentioned, which is maybe dialing them down accidentally by they're becoming too reliant on the technology and not enough on the wealth of experience that they have. I also wanted to ask you something that you're probably really sensitive to back from your White House days, which is information hallucination, which is
And that was that's into that third category, right? So
okay, there. Let's go with it.
meaning, I broadly described hallucinations to mean not the best recommendations, either because they're outright wrong, or they're just not very accurate or effective as to what they could be. So hallucinations, everyone's talked about that as a problem. And I think the short answer is having a human in the loop in any use of these tools is sort of a bedrock. I don't think that's magic to anybody who's listening. It's kind of at the moment, that's the default, but it will be in the not too distant future, that more subtle concept of hallucination, which is just bad answers. It may not be made up answers. It just may not be the best answers. And so there's a little bit of a challenge. And frankly, to some degree, my idea number one, which is how to unlock the actual clinical and claims history and the learning health system, kind of getting it into a training system, is almost an important step to reduce bad outputs today. So there's a little bit of that to think through.
I'm thinking back to the time when you wrote Innovative State, and by the way, for people listening, what is Gil talking about? Aneesh wrote really a blockbuster book talking about how technologies can transform our nation, and I think you wrote that obviously before Care Journey. You were really at the beginning of this chapter of your health journey, but I wanted to go there a little bit because.
Sure.
On one hand, new technologies can transform our nation, our system. CMS, you talked about, obviously HHS, we have FDA, obviously CDC. All of these mammoth health organizations of our government are dependent upon rapid access to information and interpretation. a few days ago, our nation had an update, a systems update that crashed countless systems, airlines, of course, Microsoft, banking, and so forth. You jumped on as an expert on CNBC to talk a little bit about that. And I wanted to grab your expertise because the last few years you've become known, obviously, as a health information expert, but often people who don't know you well um, really sort of don't know about your expertise on cybersecurity and issues like that.
Well,
Can you
a
talk
little bit of
about
context
that?
and history. In the White House CTO role that I held, as much as I loved my healthcare brothers and sisters, had a bit of a broader purview. It was to make sure that we maximize the value of tech, data, and innovation to solve problems. In the cyber domain, while we had a CIO, my brother in arms, Vivek Kundra, did a phenomenal job making sure that the $80 billion of IT spend in the government had security built in from day one, or at least put us on a path or policy to enable that. I was on the R&D domain. So a lot of that, you could see that issue here. So let's just connect those dots, Gil. So a lot of the cybersecurity posture of today is moat building. So someone finds out there's an attack vector, and the companies like CrowdStrike simply capture all those attack vectors, update the libraries everywhere else in the country, so you could stop, or the world could stop the attack. That is, so you almost have the mistake of saying, hey, I'm going to grant you really special, privileged administrative writing power. You can write into my systems immediately, because if you find a flaw, you got to block that attacker. So I'm kind of, in a weird way, granting you ridiculous security rights to update my systems without my hands touching the keys. And here you are now. The downside is you just shipped me bad code that crashed my systems. I had no hands-on keys to know what you were doing. I granted you that power because I needed you to stop the next attack that was known to you but not to me. So I was willing to trade some access and administrative privilege for this right. Clearly, CrowdStrike did not have their I's and T's crossed, didn't quality assurance, didn't test. So they, in my mind, it appears, underperformed the gifted position they're in. And it makes you wonder, should anybody be given the power to write into my IT systems without my hands on keys touching it? You got to have like a super key to do that. And so anyway, Gil, I just wanted to share with you these big issues that you and I have been talking about. They're not ending now, and we're going to have a great conversation in the years ahead. But
I look forward to that.
yeah, and I think I'll end with this statement, if I may, which is simple. What can we do to ensure every individual that needs the kind of augmented support to your language as they progress through the healthcare system has access to it and can use it? That does mean, in my view, the tools and technologies that now my collective firm, Arcadia, are building are hopefully put to their highest and best use towards the populations that need it most. And with accountability and population-based care, there should be an economic incentive to the provider community to do that type of work. And so that's this hand in glove kind of conversation,
Aneesh,
safely and securely.
I want to thank you. First of all, I know you're on a mission today with your role as chief strategy officer at Arcadia. I want to again congratulate you on this and what you've done with Care Journey, its next chapter inside of Arcadia. Greg and I are going to continue this conversation for just a little bit. I know you've got to jump from your offices in Virginia to speak to colleagues in California about all these important issues. Continued success. Thanks for joining us, and we'll have you back.
Thank you.
Hey, Greg. That was a great conversation. I know that Aneesh Chopra, who is now Chief Strategy Officer at Arcadia, obviously many of us know him from his time at the Obama White House as our nation's first Chief Technology Officer. What a sort of a person of great knowledge. It was also great to know that Senator Mark Warner is a mentor of his, and obviously Senator Warner and I had the privilege of not too long ago exchanging conversation about cybersecurity issues, not only for our nation's defense, but obviously for the defense of our health system. So he's hanging out with great people. Greg, I just wanted to recap a little bit with you for a few moments, because we've had on people like John Nosta, on the show. We've had on Julian de Salisbury and Ritesh Patel talking a little bit about the future of digital health, where it's going. And now, of course, someone who's really set in place our nation's information system around health, Aneesh Chopra. I want to get your impression because I think we're making steady progress in some ways. And in some ways, I feel like we're still back when Aneesh was in the White House. Was that 2009 or something like that, way back when? So, I mean, what's your takeaway of all this? Are we making progress or are we marching in place?
Oh my. You talk about a 5,000-watt light bulb, in terms of innovation and insights. He's one of a kind. The dynamic duo of Aneesh Chopra and Todd Park back in the day of the Obama administration and the rollout of ERA and then high tech, there were no better lightning rods for the innovation conversation, moving that forward. So I don't know what to say. What a quality guy.
I'm impressed. I'm glad we had Aneesh back on. And
Yes.
it's rare when we have people back on again. It's appreciated that he was able to jump on in between things like this. The reality is I'm impressed with Aneesh, not just in terms of his knowledge of information and technology, its impact on humanity, but his sense of purpose and desire to make a difference in the world. No, here's one of our nation's best and brightest, who's dedicating himself and his people to improving our health through access to information, and obviously information that we can trust. That's the hard part. I think that we've got a lot of information out there. I think that there's a lack of trust. I think there's a lot of distrust in information today. I think Aneesh is trying to tackle that head on. And I think all of us really have to be rooting for him in this new role and responsibility. So, I mean, that's encouraging. My only disappointment is since Innovative State, he's not come out with another book. And I think we have to hold his feet to the fire a little bit on that one, my friend. So we've got a lot going on the show. Greg, as always, I want to thank you. And we jumped right into the show. I didn't have a chance to express my acknowledgement for the gracious introduction and for your support for obviously making sure that health innovation, good and bad, has a platform to be heard and people can engage. So to you, a tip of the hat, as always, and to our listeners, I thank you so much for joining us on this special episode of Health Unabashed.
And that, dear listeners, is the last note on today's melody. A huge thank you to the worldwide audience who regularly tunes in, and a hat tip to our special guest, Aneesh Chopra, the former president of CareJourney, now serving as Chief Strategy Officer at Arcadia. Arcadia is a leading data platform for healthcare, providing proprietary analytics and workflow tools now integrated with CareJourney's cost, quality, and benchmark data. CareJourney derives market-leading analytics from Medicare, Medicaid, Medicare Advantage, and commercial claims data across more than 300 million beneficiaries and over 2 million providers nationwide. Payers, providers, and employers can use these actionable insights to accelerate growth and improve performance. Do follow Aneesh's work on the web via www.carejourney.com or arcadia.io, and on Twitter via @Aneesh Chopra or @Arcadia Health IT. Health Unabashed streams live 3 times a day on Healthcare Now Radio, Monday through Friday, 10:30 a.m., 6:30 p.m., and 2:30 a.m. Eastern, and that's 7:30 a.m., 3:30 p.m., and 11:30 p.m. Pacific. Stay social with Gil and me on Twitter via @Gil_Bash, and that is BASHE. And Greg Masters, MPH, and that's Greg with 2 G's. And don't forget to give your tweets some zing with our hashtag Health Unabashed. Until we meet again, pursue your passion for better health and with no apologies.